You've taken over for some months now. What did you meet on ground, and how have you been able to manage so that you can have a smooth sail as you serve as Minister of Sports?
Absolutely. I took over about 6 months ago and still counting, and it feels like perhaps some 2 months instead of 6 months. But I think that I've taken over a sector that is not only central but also pivotal, like you said. A sector in which you have two clear mandates, one for the youth population, which is a bulging population, and one for sports development. And when you look at it, virtually all Nigerians really love sports, one sport or another. Nigerians also love their victories. We like to just win. We're winners. Yes, and that's the spirit. But I think that the last 6 months, we met an ongoing process, a process in which attempts were made to change the fundamentals of sports development and youth development in the country. However, what we've done is to do an audit of what we met on ground and come up with a plan, a strategy that we can unfold to not just change the narrative, but also change the fundamentals. We believe that we must change the fundamentals of our sports development and youth development before we can start talking about changing the narrative. So what we have done is to go back, not reinventing the wheel, but also sharpening the wheels and the tools to see how we can better accelerate youth engagement, youth development, and also sports development in all these ramifications.
All right, if there is any thing that we in the sports sector, especially we journalists, hear more often, is always the shortage of funding when it comes to sports activities. So what steps are the federal government taking right now so that these issues of funding and getting more investment can be solved on a permanent basis?
Well, that's a very critical question. But let me just take a bit of something that is tangential to it, but it's critical. This country, first, is blessed with abundant sporting talents across the country. That is critical, because even if you have funding and you don't have the talents, it becomes a problem. But unfortunately, we don't have the kind of funding we need to match developing these talents and taking them to the highest level of sports competition. So we have the question of funding, we have the question of talents that are untapped, and then we have the issue of infrastructure, facilities, equipment. Now, you can't separate these three. You must put them together. And there's an acute shortage of funding. What have we done? We have looked at what obtains in other societies. South Africa, Brazil, Ghana, Jamaica. These are countries that have had over time very successful sports development and very transformational plans in which the athletes are the core, in which support has come for the industry. And what we have seen is that in these countries, sports is a business. Sports is an industry. In Nigeria, sport is not business. Sport is government's, whether government supports it or not. Sport is classified as recreation with the MBS survey. For instance, our sports brings in 350 million annually. In the UK, it brings in 38.5 billion annually. In America, 42 billion. Globally, 1.3 trillion.
This is all dollars now.
In dollars. Okay. All of it in dollars. Nigeria plays with a paltry 350 million. So there are opportunities. So what we have done, devoted the last 5 months trying to develop a business model around sports. In the next 2 months or so, we're going to have a new national sports industry policy that will have at its center a model to bring private money into sports. And that's the future of sports in this country. Government cannot entirely fund sports. When you look at other countries, they've moved away from government funding sports. Government is a part of it, but 80% of the funds that go into sports comes from the private sector because sports is business.
Before we talk about other aspects of funding, especially the Adopt an Athlete campaign, which is a brainchild of your office, I am looking at a possibility of the federal government, will I say, imposing some sort of a corporate social responsibility theory that is practical, whereby multinationals who make money from this country can, by law, invest in sports. How feasible or plausible is this idea?
Well, that is feasible. But also, you see, we have a sports development policy that is devoid of a private component. And that's why we must develop a policy that can also suggest what you talked about, private individuals coming in, some kind of responsibility. What we have now is, if the ministry engages with these corporate bodies, through that engagement, you get support for it. Can we have that to be mandated via a policy? That's possible. So the policy we're putting together is looking at a whole range of possibilities, but we're also benchmarking and looking at what obtains in other societies that have excelled without trying to reinvent the wheel. We have worked with the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG. They have done a 3-year research on sports as an industry. What we have done in the last 4 months is try to escalate that process. And just last Thursday, I inaugurated the SIWG, the Sports Industry Working Group. In another 2 weeks, they will move out to talk to engage over 38 critical stakeholders. And the corporate organizations are there. They will talk to them about the sports industry. They will talk to them about their social responsibility, how they can bring some of those funds into what we're doing. But of course, under the Adopt an Athlete program, I know we're still going to get to it, we have recorded a huge success. Because when we engaged Dangote, it was from that principle of corporate social responsibility. We have Dangote who has committed, the documents are ready, is committing over $1 million to fix the national stadium, particularly the pitch, the scoreboards, and the lights, to make it functional. And work will start any moment from now. So that's the kind of engagement we want to see eventually, because like I said, government cannot fund sports in its entirety. You don't find it anywhere in the world anymore.
Okay, let's look at the NESG research you talked about. Can you give us an idea of some of the outcome from their research findings?
Absolutely. Their research is detailed, but I'm going to just tiptoe around some of the key points that we have found as the pillars to help us develop a sports industry policy. I think what is the most far-reaching, the conclusion of the matter, is that we need 4 things to be able to turn sports into business, to be able to bring about the renaissance and the revolution we want to see in our sports development. We call them the 3 I's and 1 P. First, we need infrastructure, that is facilities. That's the first I. Without sporting facilities, the infrastructure, the equipment in them, you can't talk about sports development. Second, we need investment. We need investment either from government, from private individuals, from corporate organizations, grants from international organizations, as the case may be, critical. The third I is incentive. The government must provide incentives for people to invest in sports, just as you have incentives for people in several other industries, as the case may be, aviation, manufacturing, etc. Sports must be put on even keel with all these other sectors. Now, the P is policy. The 3 I's will not be successful without the P. We need to come up with a sports industry policy that will enunciate all these 3 or 4 other critical aspects. And once that policy is in place, for instance, under that policy, there must be a level of tax breaks or tax holidays. You must be able to give free land for 90 years for someone to build a stadium without taxing the person. So policy is critical in all of this. So we're working on the ingredients that will go into this policy that will evolve eventually. And we hope that very soon we're going to get there.
Still, since we're talking about policy and infrastructure, I would like to draw your attention to something that has been a problem for decades, which is maintenance of our facilities.
Yeah.
How well would the P, which stands for policy, ensure that maintenance is given due consideration and, of course,
Well, I think you just hit on something that's critical. You know, before we even got to the point of engaging NESG, in the very first 4 weeks that we got into office, one of the major focus was infrastructure. But beyond that, we talk about the maintenance, the upgrade, and the management. When you look at what we've had now, National Stadium, Lagos, Surulere, Abuja National Stadium, Moshood Abiola Stadium, Ahmadu Bello Stadium in Kaduna, and Obafemi Awolowo Stadium, formerly Liberty Stadium in Ibadan. There's a common thread that runs through why they have been abandoned. It's because there's been no proper management. The necessary upgrades have not been done. The maintenance needed over the years have not been done. The simple answer often is there's no funds. But then there must be a level of maintenance culture, first built into the contract itself, also a maintenance plan by the ministry itself to say, what is the minimum level of maintenance we can give these facilities? If we had maintained a minimum level of maintenance over the years, the level of deterioration we see now that we're confronted with wouldn't have been this way. So part of that policy is to make sure that whatever upgrade we do with these stadiums, as the case may be, there must be a maintenance plan with it. For the Abuja Stadium that Alhaji Dangote is doing, there's a 2-year maintenance plan. And we believe that by the time that expires, the ministry can take it up. Also find some other partners to take it up. So maintenance is critical.
Yes, please, I would also like to suggest when these policies come into full swing, I think it's time for the federal government to stamp its authority as regards the issue of renting out our sporting facilities to religious organizations. I think that's something that
well, that's important. If you just back up a bit, sometime in December, probably around December the 20th or 21st, I actually issued a statement in which I said, going forward, any non-sporting event will no longer be allowed in any of our stadiums across the country. Now, we have some approvals that have been given before I took that decision on behalf of the ministry. We're trying to look at that, how we can, some approvals were given, monies were paid to the ministry. We're trying to see how we can get over that. If that would be a bit difficult, we just honor the 1 or 2 approvals we've had prior to that. But I can assure you, that is in the past tense. Unless it's a sports-related activity, which we're going to vet, our stadiums will no longer be used for religious activities. And I think that's just the right thing to do. As we bring in government public money, as we bring in private money to fix and upgrade this stadium, we must use them for the purposes for which they are meant. Okay. And we're committed to that.
All right. Now, I want to ask, or we would like to know that there are countries in the world where there is a lot of emphasis on starting people very young, from schools and so on as they grow. But in Nigeria, we have several schools that don't even have sporting facilities, and you have young people who are not really too much interested in sports because schools don't even have the platform. So how do you think you can reconcile this and make a change the narrative?
Well, I think that change has begun, and there are indicators to that. I think we lost attention for a while. We saw that we were able to just plug our Nigerians who are abroad, who have gone to schools abroad and have become great talents developed by other countries. We saw that it was easy for us to just plug them whenever there are international competitions, either for Super Eagles or for any of our national teams. And that way, we basically just forgot the programs we had in the past, the Principals Cup, the Academicals, the inter-house sports, and the rest. So that sporting culture we had in the immediate the 2 decades of post-independence gradually disappeared. What we have done is to place an emphasis. One of the pillars of the 5 pillars we've been working on is grassroots sports development. And embedded in that is the flavor of the talent hunt program, that we are devoted to hunting for talents at the grassroots level. But beyond that, to also support grassroots sports. Just 3 days ago, we had a meeting with Nestle. They have sponsored primary and secondary school sports over the years. We're going to sign an MOU with them. That's one. Two, in the last 3 months, we have really shown the way. Going out there, looking for talents as young as 8-year-old talents in boxing, in tennis, in football, etc. And we're working on partnerships. We're creating a program under our Talent On program that will take up these talents as we see them, nurture them, and then feed them to the federations so that they can represent the country.
Now, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you. We're now moving to youth development on the new allowance for youth corpus. I believe that's quite an achievement. Yeah. Now, what other plan do you have for these young people who are serving the country in terms of youth development?
Absolutely. First, let me thank President Muhammadu Buhari for making this happen. They call it Alawi for the youth corpus, that is 3,000. It came in the nick of time. And of course, let me also thank the Minister of Labor and Productivity, and of course, his Minister of State for the work they did, negotiating the minimum wage. It was a very tough period, but eventually we had that happen quickly. For our youth, when you look at it, the single largest concentration of youth in this country is the NYC. Over 330,000 youth corpus every year. So if you really want to make impact, that is the starting point. And we're engaging with the NYC. The NYC, of course, is under the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development. For instance, they have a program called Sahid. It's a digital training program. It's 10 days of training on digital skills whilst you're in camp for 3 weeks. We have built an extension to that. Once you're done with 3 weeks of camping, 10 days of digital training, you can make a transition into our dy.ng, Digital Youth Nigeria, which we have created, which is aimed at equipping Nigerian youth with digital skills for 3 months training. So while they're on the 1 year youth service, they can plug into our dy.ng for a 3 months program to learn digital skills. That's one aspect. Beyond that, we also have the Junior Achievement Program. We're going to invest about 150 of them, train them as instructors that will work in the digital youth hubs that we have across the country, about 64 digital hubs. So that partnership is growing. But beyond that, we think that beyond the youth service year, because they still go out there in the job market, we have started a program called the WEP, Work Experience Program. Beyond your certificate, your degrees, beyond your 1 year youth service, you end up in the job market without any experience, zero experience, and that makes it difficult for you to be employed. So we started a 3 months program which they can apply, and they can be placed in any organization, as the case may be, to gain experience for 3 months. We think that with that on their resume, 3 months experience in a relevant organization, that increases their level of employability.
Okay, well, I was also going to ask you if there are plans to promote more vocational skills development amongst youths, because I think lots of attention is being given to educational qualification. But if we are going to be real, the Nigerian society for today, like we always say, that your certificate can take you far, but your certificate, what your hands can do,
your skills,
your skills will take you
further.
Well,
we learned a good lesson at the beginning of our tenure from Thailand. Thailand also has a restless youth population, and what they did was to go to Pearson's educational organization in the UK, and I'm sure the Minister of Education, I'm glad he has gone to the UK too, and we're going to work with them on that. Pearson's came to Thailand and then decided to train the youth on digital skills. But beyond that, they also realized that they can also train them on agriculture. So they brought in smart technology, and within 2 years trained over 25,000 smart youth agriculturists. Now, the profile of the youth in this country is a bit twisted. When you talk about the youth, we only think about the diploma holders and the degree holders. What about those who are also youth but at the lower rung of the ladder, the vulcanizers? You understand? The small guy that has a small store. Technical education is critical. technical education is critical. So in engaging the youth, we're working with the Ministry of Education to see the technical schools they have, to emphasize skills-based training that can turn them into entrepreneurs. That is important. And that is why the DOI.NG that we're doing is critical. Beyond your certificate, you're given what we call the AA. You need an added advantage. Added advantage of 3 months practical experience working somewhere. Added advantage of the skills to develop an app, which you can actually do, and then beyond your certificate. So when you look at it, we're looking at the upper crust, degree holders and also the diploma holders. But then we're also looking at the lower of the pyramid, the lower crust, to see how we can bring technology into vocational training, infuse technology into technical training.
Now, we talked a little about youth development. Let's look at some other areas now that we would like you to look into. The Ministry of Communications has severally said that ICT is a very veritable tool to check poverty and unemployment, and there are several programs that they've designed and developed. In fact, there are some that are particularly for the youth. So how is the ministry, that's your ministry, Minister of Youth and Sports, now leveraging on what the ICT sector has to offer?
Yeah, I think we share the same vision with the Ministry of Communications. We also have similar plans. Don't forget, the Ministry of Youth and Sport has the mandate for the youth population of our country. We have a document approved by FEC, which is the National Youth Policy, NYP. In that youth policy, there are 11 thematic areas: youth and sports, youth and education, youth and drug abuse.
Okay, so sir, kindly hold your thoughts, sir. We will come back to you. We have a caller on the line.
Yeah, I'm on the line. Good morning.
Good morning. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Yeah, my name is Odaze. I'm reaching you from Ila, Delta State. Good morning, Honorable Minister, sir.
Good morning.
I must tell you that I'm pleasantly surprised and impressed with all what you said. And I know a lot of Nigerians that are into youth organizations must be very happy. The relief you get the youth service members, that the core members, and the way you are picking up interest on them. Then, of course, our sports. We've laid more emphasis on footballing, but from what you've said, it looks like we are spreading our dragnet to other sports, which is highly commendable. And employment, you just started talking about the artisans. The artisans are so many and they are looming, and most of them do not have formal education. So please, no matter the policy, the Nigerian government is taking this an important group of young people in this country, and they are very, very useful, especially in the core rural area. Please always come to the core rural area. We need some sporting activities there too to keep these children out of cultism. Thank you very much. God bless Nigeria.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling on the program. Okay.
You can respond.
Yes, you can go ahead.
Well, I thank the last caller for her remarks. Very generous, but I think she just spoke very well, excellently well. Let me talk about the artisans, like we talked about, the lower rung of the ladder. 2 weeks ago, I was in Bielsa. And on my way out of Bielsa, I went to one of the villages in Bielsa, Amaoa. They have a sports academy there, in a local rural setting. And I met 320 young girls and boys between the ages of 10 and 15. They're in that sports academy as young sportsmen and women, but also going to school. So education and sports together. But they're so young. About 10 different sporting activities: boxing, wrestling, football, and the rest. And I was really encouraged from what I saw there. I've been to a couple of others. I've been to one in Abuja here. What we're looking at is we want to turn one or two of these centers to sports academy, where we can bring our young ones there, support them with free education, free feeding, and give them opportunity to explore their talents.
All right, let's take another caller. We have a caller on the line. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, tell us who you are.
My name is Zaka. I'm calling from Asokwe.
Okay. Zaka from Asoko.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, Zaka.
Wonderful topic. Yes, wonderful topic. The truth is, like the first caller said, we have a looming youth or artisans out there. But I think one thing that will help a lot is that we have a lot of talent that if only a workshop can be set in place with all well-equipped machines all there and open it for the youth with ideas and projects they have, I think it will help us to harness the ideas in the minds of our youth today. Seriously, this has been a dream that I have. But if the government will do that, it's going to help a lot. It will go a long way in helping the youth with ideas. Some of us have a lot of ideas we want to build into projects to see it exist.
All right,
But we
Zaka.
don't have where to go. You know, you go from place to place.
Zaka, please, we need you to summarize.
Yes, go straight to the point.
Yeah. All right, yes. So if the government will put something like that in place in various locations where the youth will go and develop their ideas, I think it will go a long way in helping us.
All right, thank you very much,
Yeah,
Zaka.
I think that is already ongoing. Zaka, if you have followed us very closely, the Ministry of Youth and Sport has about 45 youth development centers across the country. Conceived 10 years ago. Unfortunately, because of paucity of funds, not just about 10 or 12 have been really completed. So we have recommitted this year to activate 2 youth development centers in each of the geopolitical zones. That's about 12 youth development centers. Just last week, I also met with the Minister of Niger Delta. In about 5 states of the Federation, they have completed youth development centers with hostels and facilities. Next week, I'll be going to Ondo. I'll be going to Akwa Ibom. These centers can train or house between 500 to 1,000 youth. We intend to take over these centers immediately. The one in Ondo to serve the southwest, the one in Akwa Ibom to serve the south, as the case may be. We'll get these places equipped with the technology, the computers needed, and then we can bring in our youth to train them, not just in digital skills, but the wide range of entrepreneurship skills that they need. Beyond that, once we're able to activate these centers, our plan is to have 250 youth in each of these centers, trained for 3 months in about 10 different digital skills area. And when you do the arithmetic, 250 youth every 3 months, 12 centers across the country, then you know that we have actually started the process. But we're closer home because Ondo and Akwa Ibom is ready. We just need to equip them, and that can take 2,000 youths on a 3-month basis that we're going to train them, from those that are just the uneducated to the ones that are educated.
Permit me to also ask that this caller could just make his opinion heard. Go ahead. Hello.
Hello, good
Hello,
morning.
good morning. How are you?
Fine. Please go ahead. Tell us who you are and where you're calling from.
My name is Emmanuel. I'm calling you from Maitama.
All right. Please
Good
go ahead.
morning, Honorable Minister, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Emmanuel.
Glad you are for us, the youth.
How old are
I'm
you?
happy you talk about sport as an industry.
Yes.
When we look at an industry is for a whole lot of change. I don't need to play football to benefit from the industry of football. I don't need to be in the field to pay to sacrifice for the football. But through channel or cable, like you have Sky, or in Nigeria we have DSTV, people are making a whole lot of money from us Nigerians. But in our local football, you only hear it is played, it's not televised anywhere, and nobody is even making money or local fabrication of their jersey or emblem or whatever. I want to believe that if we look at how Europe developed their sport, even dogs race, they televise, and people are working, and we're talking about employment. It pays a whole lot of people salary, including the referee and even those workers. Let us think inward. How can we make our sport in Africa, Nigeria, taking a lead to be interesting? It's not only those playing, but things that matter, that it's an industry. How can a local person linked to this sport. Is it inter-house sport? School is doing inter-house sport. It can be connected.
Thank you very much,
Make money
Emmanuel.
from it. That is how it can be attracted.
Thank you
That's
very
all I
much,
need to say.
Emmanuel.
Thank
You have just 1 minute. Thank you very much. The minister will respond
Yeah,
now.
Mr. Emmanuel, that's exactly what we're about. That's what we've been doing in the last 5 months. If you have listened to me earlier, sports as an industry is an overriding concern. Right now, we have a national sports policy. We're reviewing that policy because we want to come up with a national sports industry policy. The key word there is industry. And I'm glad, you talked about a number of things. Apart from the players, the athletes, it's a whole industry. It's an industry because even those that are tangential to sporting activities can also benefit from it. You talk about merchandise, critical. You talk about even the ball boys that are employed on the day of the game. You talk about those that own stores in the stadium that sell drinks and food. It's an entire industry. And we have a template. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. We've looked at look at the La Liga, look at the EPL, look at what obtains in several other countries where sport is a multi-billion-dollar business. We've taken that template. We're trying to adapt it. And eventually, I'm sure before the end of this year, in fact by June, we'll have had a policy that will help to turn around, in a very radical sense, sports development in this country.
All right, we have a message from our WhatsApp portal. This is from Kingsley James. He says, Honorable Minister, you have been doing well. I just want to find out how you are preparing the youth to take leadership positions, especially with the bill signed by President Muhammadu Buhari on the Not Too Young to Run campaign.
Absolutely.
Honorable Minister, before you respond to that, let's just take this call very quickly. Hello? Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, that's really important because with the signing of that bill, and if you have listened to President Muhammadu Buhari even sometime in December when the youth paid him a visit, and he told them, you better be ready. Let me talk briefly about our umbrella program called DEAL, DEEL. That is the nomenclature under which we hope to engage our youth. The first D stands for digital literacy and digital skills acquisition. The E stands for entrepreneurship. The second E stands for employability. And the L stands for leadership and mentoring. It's called DEAL. Before, perhaps sometime in May, the president would launch that program officially. But you look at all I've been talking about under the youth development is captured on the DEAL. Yes, our youth are leaders of tomorrow, but unless we prepare them today for leadership, they cannot lead tomorrow. And we have what we call the CLTC, one of the agencies under the ministry, Citizenship and Leadership Training Center. That's one. We also have the Nigerian Youth Parliament, in which you have young ones from across the country hold, they're parliamentarians understudying what is happening, and they go around the country. It's a process. But beyond what government can do, we also need private organizations to put youth in key positions so that they can be tutored and they can learn.
Okay. Let's take this call. Hello.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Tell us who you are and where you're calling from.
This is Bishop Iso from Sabogida in Edo State.
All right, please go ahead.
I want to let us all greet the Honorable Minister there
Good morning.
and to give a word of advice. You see, these sporting activities in schools, primary and secondary, we should really go into them. Because in the good old days, I can remember, in Bender State, before Bender State, athletes and footballers were got from these primary schools, secondary schools, in the house sports. And then we used to have what we call the Principal's Cup, organized by all the Nigerian principals of secondary schools. From there, we discovered that this were gotten. I can mention some names, but I think my secretary is not here now. They were able to get so many footballers from there. And that's why we're able to really get the footballers for the better state, better insurance. So let us encourage primary and secondary school inter-house sports activities. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
I think, what we have been about is returning the Nigerian sports development back to the basics. Like I often say, the gold is often in the child. That is, unless you harvest a young talent in the primary school, you nurture them through the secondary school and develop them to when they can compete. When they win gold, it's not something that started 3 years. It started when the person was a child. So I often say the gold is in the child. And I think, you talk about better insurance, you can talk about Mighty Jets of Jos, Leventis, ICC Shooting Stars. The Odegwamis of this world, the Model Lawals, the Olabis that came through that rank, came from the Principal's Cup, the Academicals, and all of them. The ministry is working with the Ministry of Education to bring back Headmasters Cup, that we have about 10,000 primary schools competing. We want to also encourage inter-house sports. That's why we're working with Nestle at the secondary school level. And I think returning our sports development back to the basics is going to be important. We must create a pool of talents that we can tap into, we can nurture, we can train over time, and then help them to represent this country.
Building on this, is there any way that a curriculum or a structure can be built whereby the Ministry of Sports and the Ministry of Education come together to have sports in the curriculum, whereby we have sports majors in different schools, just like it is
in America,
whereby for a child to play in the finals for his class or for his school, he must attain a particular grade, like sports majors.
Yeah, I think there's an ongoing conversation between the relevant ministries, especially Education and Sports Ministry.
Honorable Minister, I beg your pardon. Let's just take this call very quickly. Hello. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, good morning. Tell us who you are and
Good morning.
where you're. Yes, go ahead. Tell us who you are and where you're calling from. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Can you please continue on that
Go
conversation?
ahead, please.
Yeah, there's an ongoing conversation and engagement with the Education Ministry. But also, you must understand how it works. The Ministry of Education at the federal level stands, and then you have local government and states who are purely in charge of sports. But then we have the database. When you look at templates, you see what obtains in America. Even if you are the best, most talented basketball player, you must go into an educational institution and study something. I think that will be one of the most important decisions we will take, to make sure that we reward talented sports men and women with education. I tell you, it's a kind of reward, because education teaches you discipline. It puts you within the system. In sports, you must also be disciplined. So we must marry sports and education. We've had a slight departure. Remember when I was a young boy, if I went out to play football, instead of going for a lesson, I got beaten by my parents. That time is far gone. We must, in a deliberate way, create that culture that welds sports and education together. And I think certain ministries, youth and sports, education, will have to work to look at this and make sure that we build a reward system to encourage our sportsmen and women to go through education so that they can enjoy the full benefits of being sportsmen and women.
All right, sir. I'd like to bring you to something that is more important right now to the nation. Nigeria's preparations for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics in Japan. Where are we right now?
Well, we're barely about 5 months plus to Tokyo, and I think our preparations, even particularly at the level of the individual sportsmen and women, began several years back on an incremental basis. We focused on the last few months. We're counting down on the days. That's for the final logistics of it. But we have our athletes have gone through qualifiers. Most of them are in schools. Some have gone for trials. They've gone for tournaments. They've gone for championships over the years, preparing themselves, competing at the highest level. We've been to the Doha Championships, and we are ready as a country, because our athletes over the years have been able to engage themselves in training, in camping, and in competitions.
Okay, let me just read one message from the WhatsApp portal very quickly. This is from Angel Salt, a professional football player with Bagada FC in Lagos. It says, greetings to the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports, Mr. Sandidari. I think we're leaving a stone unturned. How do we train the trainers and coach the coaches?
Well, that stone is being turned already. And people must follow in a deliberate way what is happening within the sports ecosystem. Just 2 weeks ago, working with La Liga, we brought about 200 youth coaches for training here in Abuja. And I was there at the end of the training. That happens on an annual basis. But I also agree the bane of our football development, particularly our sports development, is the quality of our coaches, because the quality of our coaches determines the technical depth of our sportsmen and women and of our sports in general. And I think in a deliberate way, I've met with sports directors all over the country in September in Ilorin. We're planning to have this year the first coaching course for all coaches. Each state will bring about 5 coaches in 5 different sports. And we gather them, we bring all the experts in country, outside of the country, and we have coaching clinics. We'll do that as a pilot, and then we see how it works. Then we can do it twice every year. But I agree with you, the coaches are central to our sports development, especially the technical depth of our athletes and our sports.
Okay, before I bring you into matters as regards Edo 2020, the National Sports Festival, which is also key to grassroots development, how do we avert this fire brigade approach to preparations towards big competitions like the Olympics? Because in other countries, once one Olympic Games ends, they start preparing for the next one. I understand that in Nigeria, of course, the necessary change of tenures for the government normally affects it, but what is the long-term plan that we can do to establish a steady preparation plan?
Well, first, you must understand, government is a continuum. So even though a minister has gone, a minister comes in, we have basically picked up from what was in place. What we have done is to accelerate that process, but also to bring in a few innovations, which is in line with global best practices, to make sure that we put our athletes at the center of development, but and also bring in funds. The biggest elephant in the room for long-term planning is funding.
Minister, if you may hold that thought just for a minute, let's take this call. Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, good morning.
Hello. Good morning.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Ovunna Diklan. I'm calling from Enyibichaliki, Ebonyi State.
Wow.
I just want to ask the Honorable Commissioner his plan
Minister.
to work with the... I want to ask the Honorable Minister his plan to work with the Commissioner within our differences to ensure that our sports activities come back to normal way it was before. Because working with them, we revitalize the sporting activities within our different states and localities. And equally, he made mention of schemes. You know, many schemes that they designed to help the Nigerian youth, most of the times will be hijacked by politicians. What plan do they have to ensure that the politicians will not hijack what that is meant for the youth? Thank you, and God bless you this morning.
Yeah, let me take the second question. Thank you so much. What's his name?
Ovunna Dikland.
Ovunna Dikland. The last question you asked, the hijack. In a couple of weeks now, we're going to launch what we call NOYA. That is the Nigerian Online Youth Assembly. It's an aggregator website for Nigerian youth to aggregate the opportunities open to them. The ministry will place online, just like we have with the Empower, where for you to benefit in the Empower program, you must go online as a youth. You can register, because that's the tabula rasa. It takes care of an individual sitting somewhere giving you 50 names to go on the program, because we need your digital footprint. So that website, once it's open, several opportunities will be placed on the website, and the youth can go apply themselves to the process. We have their details, etc., etc., and then they can get. Even as we have it now, the Ministry of Youth and Sports website is functional. We just use that website to recruit 200, to engage or enroll 250 youth for the work experience program under Wilco. We're going to use that same process to engage about 100 youth engineers to work with another company in Lagos. And that's an ongoing process. So we're taking it up beyond just the analog process of enrollment and recruitment, to find a transparent way that is accessible to the youth.
All right, sir. The National Sports Festival, very, very quickly. Edo 2020.
Yes, that is what we call here the Nigerian Olympics.
Yes.
Recall the last one was in Abuja. We're excited about this one because in the last few months we have seen a gradual renaissance. We've been able to at least change the perception about sports. We've gotten quite a number of state actors and non-state actors interested in sports. Recall that in Kwara State, after 15 years of holding a state sports festival, the governor brought back the sports festival. I was in Kwara for the closing of the sports festival in Kwara after 15 years. I was in Edo 2 weeks too. After 19 years of not having the sports festival, the Edo state government brought back the sports festival. That is what we want to see happen across the country, sports festival. And then the state sports festival will culminate in the national sports festival every 2 years. So Edo, we're looking forward to Edo 2020. That is, like I said, Christian as the Nigerian Olympics, where we're going to have talents. We're looking at about 11,000 sportsmen and women, and also coaches and people that are related to the sports festival that will take place there.
Honorable Minister, this question, before we let you go, we're running fast out of time now, but we're made to understand that you grew up in the north, just to be exact, and you must have watched Dambe sports. Now,
Absolutely.
These are local sports that people are asking that can they be developed? Ayo, Dambe, para soccer, and so on. What plans do you have for things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you know, let me talk about Dambe especially.
Okay, Honorable Minister, let's just quickly take this call, then
Patrick,
go ahead, please. Hello, your name again, please.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, good morning. Go ahead, please.
I'm Comrade Patrick Ukurokraft, calling from Aruchuku in Abia State.
Please go ahead.
Honorable Minister, sir, the Nuga University Games, this time around, I don't know what is happening. In those days, that 70s, 80s, Nuga is always vibrating. But this time around, I don't know what is happening because they split. That is why to say or to suggest to the government, tell the commissioners in the state that primary school, secondary school, universities, at least in their state, they should make sure they make the sport to be vibrant. It will help the youth, not only the youth, society, and even the state. And secondly, all this our league we are having in Nigeria today, you see that the players, the team, they will travel from Abia State to Maiduguri by road. Is there no way the government can assist that by telling the owners of this sport to liaise with airliners and all the states are going to have an airport, at least to have a repair.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Please.
Thank you very much, Patrick.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you know, Patrick has a very loaded question. But let me tell you first, this will gladden your heart. Sometime in April, the Ministry of Youth and Sport is bringing together all the sports commissioners across the country for an engagement with the ministry to look at sports development at their level, to share the vision of national sports development, and then to see how both at the federal level and the state level we can collaborate. Because what we're pushing, the vision we're pushing at the federal level, must also connect with the vision that is on ground in the states. So we're going to have a meeting in April. Yes, you're talking about the mind sports.
Dambe?
Dambe?
Yes, we're talking
you know, the mind sports, Ayu, chess, and the rest. Chess, for instance, you know, we have a lot of prominence. We're supporting chess. Dambe is critical. I gave an interview to the BBC about 2 months ago. We have the online viewership of Dambe is necking almost 27 million. And we have decided that it's going to be now part of our traditional sports. At the ministry, we have a federation for traditional sports. Dambe is going to get focus. Eventually, before the summer, we'll hope to have the Dambe sports competition in Zamfara, because that's one area where it is really popular. We're going to bring all the Dambe fighters. It's a one-armed combat sport. We're going to bring them together for a championship, the very first championship of its kind in Zamfara. And we hope that eventually, we hope that Dambe will someday become one of the sports in the Olympics, Africa's very first.